Hello and welcome to the Vassals of Kingsgrave, a spin-off podcast of a spin-off podcast about from a podcast of Ice and Fire. It's a long journey, but if you're here, you probably know who we are. My name is Michal. I go by Inkasrain on the podcast of Ice and Fire forums, and I am joined by the lovely Bina007.
Who goes by Bina007 on the forums.
So today we are here to talk about a show that is that kind of leaped without permission into mine and Bina's hearts and minds and Twitter feeds. It is Shtisel, which is an Israeli TV show that aired, I believe, in like 2013 and 14 in Israel. And it recently hit Netflix, and I'd been personally in my own personal circles hearing a lot of buzz about it, and I was like, well, I don't know, I don't usually like Israeli shows, they're hard to follow, they're not so great, and then everybody's like, no, but this is amazing. So I tried it, and it is in fact amazing, and because I tweeted about it, Bina was also like, oh my gosh, let me try this, and
I'm very easily led.
Yeah. Well, I have to tell you, it's actually very funny because I've been speaking to a lot of my like Jewish compatriots about Shtisel, and they're like, I think we only think it's good because it's about us. And I was like, no, my friend Bina, who is not Jewish, who lives in England, who has never been to Israel, she likes it. It is a good show.
In fairness, I have actually been to Israel in 2010 on holiday. But yes, it is not obvious as to why I would connect so strongly, deeply, passionately, emotionally, comedically with this show. So I'm incredibly addicted to it, and I'm so pleased to be able to talk to you about it because we have not convinced anyone else to watch this.
I know. Yeah. So I think we should say like what are the appeals of Shtisel to obviously the appeals to me are fairly obvious. It's my peeps. Why do you think other people should watch Shtisel?
It's just really well made. It's really well acted and it's funny and it's bittersweet and it's just a beautiful family portrait. And insofar as some of the stuff they go through as a family is very specific to the community they live in, but some of it's so relatable. How does your dad cope when your mum dies? And how do you cope when granny goes into the old age home? And, I think like navigating the world of dating and unfaithful husbands and how you react when you're a kid and your parents are angry and fighting and potentially one leaves the other. That's so relatable. And then on the other hand, I think for people who aren't in the community like me, it's a kind of window into a world that we would otherwise have no access to. So for me, it's the same motivation as why do you read books, because you get to experience worlds and lives and countries and eras that you would never otherwise experience. And it just broadens the mind and just gives you so much more richness and depth. So this, an Orthodox Jewish community in Israel, this is something that I would never normally have access to or understand. And to be honest, I thought it would be much more alien, and I was just shocked at how relatable it was.
I think part of what is, well, first of all, we should say that goes to everyone listening, but specifically to Casey Blue-Eyed Queen and SJ Lee Steven. Watch the show, guys.
Let the Vok guilt, #shame, come over the airwaves.
So yeah, I think one of the things the show does so well is it really manages to somehow translate its extremely specific world into like things that are like, there are definitely things that I was like, okay, I'm gonna understand why this is funny, but Bina's not gonna understand why this is funny, and other people are not gonna understand why it's funny. But there's so many things that are just like human and dignified and real, and it's not otherizing of the community, and it's just very like, these are people who happen to live this way, and these are their trials and tribulations and successes and sadnesses, and it's such a human thing, even though
Mm.
like half the cast is like a huge hot mess.
Yeah,
It's
and
like, oh my God.
that's so reassuring, right? That there can be some commonality. I mean, I would add two things. I would say that of the stuff that was more alien to me as a British person, I would say that some of it was less alien because I come from an Asian community where some
Hmm.
of those norms are kind of weirdly similar. So the whole concept of arranged marriage obviously is something that I have cousins and uncles who've done that and, super happy and friends from school. So that was kind of just wonderful comparing and contrasting how communities do it.
Yeah,
The
that
other
was
thing,
one of my favorite things of discussing with you is like just seeing the crossover. I think I mentioned it was like it was really very much like when Bend It Like Beckham came out, and it was so recognizable to me. And like, oh, her mom doesn't want her to wear pants, same. Oh, they don't want her associating with these people, same.
yes,
Like it is so relatable and awesome.
yeah. But then the other thing I would say is there were definitely bits in retrospect where I was like, why, what is what? And I would recommend to any friendly neighborhood Vokas that it really helps watching it if you have a Michal, a friendly neighborhood Michal. Because especially the first few episodes, I would be like live Skyping you as watching, Michal, why does this happen? And I'm really sorry to bother you while you're at work. And I felt so bad because I thought I'm watching it in my evening after work, which is like the middle of your workday. Please explain to me why this is happening. So that definitely helps. It helps to have a friendly neighborhood friend of the Jewish persuasion who can explain some stuff as well.
And I am thrilled to answer any questions I can. Obviously, it's not my exact community, and I've never, it was so interesting to me also because I was actually surprised at how familiar it seemed to me because my biggest experience living in Israel was living in a Jerusalem neighborhood called Har Nof, where I went to school for a year after high school. And we would spend a lot of time in the community and working in, doing like helping mothers in the community and things like that. And it was, I had, had in mind that this was a kind of a more modern community than I think I thought it was. Obviously, the people I was working with were Anglo, they weren't Israeli, and most of them had moved to Israel. But the design of things, like the style of furniture, the names on everybody's door, the staircases and all the buildings, like it was just shockingly similar.
Oh,
The
okay.
stuff they would use in their kitchens, like, and there's a later episode, not a spoiler, but somebody tries to clean up a mess of flour with a what's called a spongia, and it's like the daughter's like, okay, you have to use a broom actually, and I'm like, no, but I know what that is. You wrap a cloth around it and you wash the floor, and that's how you clean the bathrooms because there's a drain in the middle of the bathroom all the time. So it like actually made me kind of like a homesick in a weird way, just to
Aw.
see all, yeah, and like all the food and just, some of the things they would
Oh
shoot in like one
man,
of the
don't watch
malls.
Shtisel on an empty stomach. That's
Yeah.
bad.
Hmm. Yeah. You're gonna need some kugel.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
the food does look good. It's worth also noting on a superficial note that some of the people in it are really good looking, and
Yes.
that doesn't hurt for any TV show. And then also, I think there's something, I don't know. I mean, I found the whole concept of big, even in England, I don't find the kind of family that I grew up in, which is very extended, large, loving, sometimes overwhelming and overpowering. We don't see a lot of that on British TV. Like you might have a few Asian people, Indian people on, your mainstream serial sort of dramas, but it's just not something we see. So even if it was the Israeli version, it was just really lovely because that kind of meddling, wonderful, warm, crazy family is what I grew up with. So it made me nostalgic, even though it's so different. Also, I learnt that because I speak some German, I understand bits of Yiddish, which was like weird.
Yeah, that's one thing. I don't know. I have some issues with the my Hebrew is not great, but it was good enough to kind of tell the difference between some of the subtitles and the
Oh, are they
like.
not good?
No, they weren't bad, but sometimes they would take shortcuts and sometimes they would like colloquialize things that didn't need to be like that. But one of my biggest complaints was like, why aren't they designating when people are speaking Yiddish? Because it's actually important, like contextually, to know these characters, to know that these people speak Yiddish and these people speak Hebrew. And it's, yeah.
So go into that a little bit. So because from my perspective, it was always the dad speaking to his mum, so the older characters, and it felt like an inside language, not a everyday meeting with people outside the house language. But what are the nuances there?
So, I mean, a lot of it is that, but a lot of it also is when, when parents are talking to each other and they'll use Yiddish, or even just like little phrases that people use. I just find it very telling, like when, somebody's speaking in Hebrew, but then they'll say like, "Oh, good night" or whatever in Yiddish.
Mm.
Like to me, there's like a specific cultural blend of those two things because like there are communities who in Israel who speak Yiddish, like full stop, they speak Yiddish. There are communities in America who full stop speak Yiddish. So it's like that specific blend is very important. Like obviously the mother speaks Yiddish because she's from Europe, but that like back and forth, it kind of tells you who they are in a certain way. The
Huh.
fact that they do communicate with each other largely in Hebrew, but have times when they speak in Yiddish, and like the in school the boys are taught in Hebrew.
So the national language of Israel is Hebrew, right? It's not like a dual language culture.
I don't think so. I mean, they have like it's always like a political thing. Like, what are the signs going to be? Because they rely a lot on tourism, and obviously the Arab population has Arabic. So like most of the signs are in Hebrew, English, and Arabic. I think they just passed a law or a couple years ago that like was going to take the English off, and then people were like, "That's never going to happen, though." Israeli politics are not the most effective politics, as far as I understand it. Actually, I mean, that's something else that I really appreciated about Shtisel. It was so apolitical. Like it was not interested in plumbing any deep truths about like the state of Israel or even just like the religious people. It
Yeah.
wasn't like interrogating their lives. It was just like these are the way these are who they are, and this is
Mm.
their prejudices. These are their places where they're open, and it was
Oh, it was so
really
nice.
refreshing.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
really worried when I started watching it. It was going to be really heavy and overbearing, but I suddenly thought, no, because if this is your community, you don't talk about XYZ the whole time because it's just your life. You've internalized it, and it was a beautifully light touch. I think the only thing that was overtly maybe political is when they're having this argument about whether the school should watch the fly past of the Israeli
Mm.
Air Force, but that's pretty much it, right? I mean, it's very light. It's actually like genuine. I mean, especially earlier on, it's genuinely really funny and
Yeah.
sweet and like bonkers, and you're sort of shouting at the TV, "Oh my God, don't do that! That's just such a bad relationship mistake."
I know.
But it packs a real punch towards the end. I mean, it really moved me to tears. So
Yeah,
it's
no,
good TV.
same. It was I think, it's so interesting you bring up that the flyover thing because that really is like every year it's some kind of debate in Israeli politics. Like every year on Halloween we talk about cultural appropriation in America, and every year in Israel they talk about like the religious people aren't doing this, and does that mean that they don't like the state? And they're like, yes, we don't like the state, but like also we live here. And it's a very interesting line that a lot of people navigate, especially talking about like where you fall on the religious spectrum. It's very telling
Hmm.
your relationship to the state. And
But I
yeah.
think it's really testament to Shtisel that it examines that like in such a natural, organic way. So it's like little kids want to watch cool airplanes, right?
Hmm.
It's really delicately done. But what I loved about this program is every time something like that happened, it just sent me to Google. It's like, so what is going on with the fly pass and why is it politicized? I feel like I learnt so much from talking to you, from watching the show, from what it prompted me to read about. It was just such an enriching experience, as well as a moving and funny and amazing one.
Oh,
So,
good.
so thank you
Yeah,
for recommending it. It genuinely
of
was amazing.
course.
I can't
Yeah,
wait to do
no.
season two, but I had to wait for you to catch up because it was like really bad. Like if I wanted to discuss an
Yeah.
episode, you hadn't gotten it yet.
Do you want to touch on the characters a little bit?
Yeah, so listeners, especially Casey and S. Julie, if you want to now go and watch season one, knowing how profoundly Michal and I love it, please do so. Don't listen to the rest of this. um,
I know you have to watch subtitles. Okay, come on, get over it. You're both smart people. You can deal with it.
Come on, America.
Yeah.
Should we do it line by storyline? How do you want to Who do you want to do first?
Yeah, I think probably Akiva and Shalom would be a good place to start.
Okay.
So,
So what do we have? We've got a widowed father who is living with his feckless younger son, wants to see him married off to, the final wish of his departed mother, but also wants to find love himself. So two bachelors courting in a very specifically Orthodox Jewish way, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it was very interesting. Like, the son Akiva ends up going on all these dates in hotels, which is, first of all, I've been to a lot of those hotels. Second of all, it was really funny because that is also such a Haredi and an Orthodox thing that you will go to a hotel lounge and awkwardly drink Diet Coke and talk about things. I think the show is interesting in that it sets you up initially, I think, to be extremely sympathetic to Akiva, who's the son. And also, like, sidebar in my family now, like whenever we're talking about Akiva, we have to specify if we're talking about Akiva Shtisel or Akiva Schick, my brother. So it's very funny. Feel so bad for him. He's this artist. He's not really sure where he's going in his life, what he's doing. But like, he has a real dark side. Like, there are passive aggressive elements to him. There's like aggressive elements to him, stalkerish elements to him.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? Like when he starts off, you think he's this dreamy poet trapped in doing this boring school teacher job. And then, yeah, it starts off with what you think is maybe an innocent, earnest mistake. When a girl, he's not interested in her, and she starts crying, so he kind of proposes just to make her feel better about herself. And you're like, that's a bit weird, but we'll go with it. And then there's another woman that he really, really, really fancies called Elisheva, who's amazing. Older woman, stronger, more experienced, and he kind of starts stalking her, and I was like, is this okay? Like, no, this is not okay. Just the whole, but it's weird because he's still the dreamy, good-looking young poet that you met and you're rooting for, and as the series goes on, I mean, really almost to the end of the season, like every choice he makes becomes worse.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And it's like, and partly it's frustrating because you know that he knows that he's making bad decisions.
Oh, for
like, there are
sure.
things
Because
he
he's
does
not a
that
bad
is, like,
guy. I mean, he's intelligent
no,
and he knows right from wrong.
yeah, but some of the things he does are like straight up manipulative. Like, the way he arranges his breakup from Esty is like, I mean, it was so upsetting because it was like, you guys clearly need to break up. This is going to be an absolute disaster if you go through with this. But I mean, breaking up with her father is like basically the most cowardly, lowest way that you could possibly do something like that.
He just comes across as a real spoiled younger kid, entitled. I'm gonna dangle this young Esty, who's just so innocent and sweet, and get rid of her when I just can't be bothered. I think I'm in love with this other girl, a woman, twice widowed, who clearly has a lot going on in her life and her psychological makeup. And I'm going to keep kind of putting myself in front of her and putting myself in front of her, forcing her kind of into taking a very weird decision to get engaged, just, I think, to get some breathing space almost. And effectively kind of just runs her out of the country almost. I mean, it's just bizarre.
Yeah. I mean, part of it is not entirely his fault because obviously Elisheva has a lot of baggage that I think it's not necessarily fair to expect Akiva to grasp based on like their experience.
No, but she tells him again and again, I'm not the woman for you. There's a lot, like what I love about her is her complete self-awareness. Like there's a lot going on with her prior relationships and other stuff probably. But she's so honest with him and makes herself so vulnerable. There's this really moving scene, I guess it's halfway through, where she's trying to convince him they're ill-suited. And she actually takes off her head covering, her wig, and shows him her real hair, which is obviously this incredible vulnerability. And, this is a hugely significant thing for this woman, to show him that she's old and her hair is grey and that they're very ill-suited. And I think she bends over backwards to explain to him her situation. And he's just like, no, but I like you, I like you, I like you. So I'm not sure if he even really understands her to like her.
Yeah, no, that's true. It's definitely a lot of their issues is that Akiva is definitely in love with the idea of Elisheva,
100%.
That's a tough situation. I mean,
he's just young as well.
He is young, and you can because of the world that they're in, like they can't touch until they get married. And Elisheva is more willing to play with those boundaries, and Akiva is not. And I think that is kind of what, he has this idea like, oh, we'll get engaged. And we can and socially it will be acceptable to spend more time together, but that doesn't mean they can actually like do anything. And when Elisheva decides to try and change things up with that, he can't deal with it. Like that is absolutely what like drives him crazy. And unfortunately, because of his stupid dad, he's not given the chance to really deal with it.
And it makes sense that she would be more willing to play with those boundaries because after all, she has been married twice before. So
Hmm.
that sort of breaking of the boundary is less severe for her than for someone who's never had that experience.
Yeah.
So I get
And
that.
it's kind of suggested throughout the whole show that she's like a little bit more rebellious than I think she appears.
Yeah, her wig's just cut that little bit sexier. Her clothes are a
Yeah.
little bit more form-fitting. It's really funny because no one looks slutty in this show, right? Because they're all
Right.
dressed so conservatively. But someone does kind of like slut shame her a little bit and say, well, you always wore your clothes a little bit too tight. And you're like,
Hmm.
seriously?
Yeah, I know.
The gradations here are so fine, I can't keep up.
I know. Well, that's almost like it's almost very like I had a teacher. I went to a religious girls' college, and I had a professor who compared us all to characters in Jane Austen novels, and she was like the degree of like because of the minutia that can actually really matter is such a huge part of your lives and like comportment and again like the length to which someone's wig is cut and the style it's cut in and the degree to which their clothes are tight or not tight. I obviously enjoyed it because I live that and I can read it, but I think it's also probably just interesting to watch because that's in a
Mm.
lot of drama nowadays you don't get that delicacy because there aren't those boundaries.
Yeah, and it prompted in between us a whole conversation about if you were married, would you wear your hair covered? And it's kind of weird, given the situation I'm in this year, that it kind of made me think, yeah, would it be nice to have something that was shared only with your husband that, was very intimate and private? So it really prompted me to really examine, because I've just grown up in Britain. I don't, I'm very assimilated state to I don't cover up in the way that some Asians do. And I just it made me really think, like, what is the purpose of this? Is it actually quite beautiful? Would you consider doing it? Like, it was very provocative. But I love that analogy between Austen literature, like the idea of, being able to drive a man wild just by a flash of an ankle because it's such a
Hmm.
different culture. Like the boundaries are just so different, and the stakes are so much higher. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
What more to say about Akiva? So by the end of season one, did you still like him? Are you still rooting for him?
Oh, I don't know. I think I will root for him if he's able to grow from this. He
Mm.
is still like a young idiot, and I get that. One of my favorite unintentionally funny things in the show, though, is like every time he's substitute teaching or teaching, like he gets something from Elisheva, and he's like, "I'll be right back."
Yeah, he's like the
And he
world's
starts
worst teacher.
getting any education.
So he's also a very talented painter, and he goes to work for a very famous successful gallerist, an artist, but realizes that that artist is paying other people to paint his pictures, and then he just signs them. And Akiva kind of goes along with it, but really resents it, and then has a moment of conscience near the end. How did you feel about that whole?
That was tough. Like that was, I think, as close as they got. I mean, the guy Fuchs is a total sleaze. Like he's an absolute sleaze, and it was just really interesting to see. I mean, it was uncomfortable because I've been in galleries like that, and like I've been the American tourist being like, "Lo, but on the Ivrit bivakasha," like I want to speak in Hebrew, and it did kind of make me wonder like if there's maybe more going on with these galleries than I thought there was. In general, it was interesting to see somebody because it's not a life where you're supposed to just be living for yourself, right? Like everybody is so involved in family. Like even, the
Yes.
widows are like looking to get married again very, very quickly. And to have this character and Akiva's kind of naturally almost in that position where he can be that selfish because he is single and he has his father to take care of and that's really it. But to see Fuchs just being like, I'm just getting mine and I don't have any qualms about taking advantage of other painters and it's totally fine. Not to mention like any of the like Jewish law issues of fraud that are,
It was
not,
almost glorious to see a person so apparently at ease with being fraudulent. I mean,
yeah, right?
he just doesn't betray any conscience around it. It was just like, what
Yeah.
is going on?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was absolutely bizarre. But it didn't make me respect Akiva a bit because I thought he does have a bit of backbone about not being utterly.
Yeah,
I mean, he
no,
goes on with it for a bit,
he,
but then he pulls back.
he kind of like wavers back and forth and then gets a backbone.
He does treat his dad quite poorly at some point. Or do you think his dad treats him poorly? I don't know.
Ooh, I think Shalom is pretty abusive.
Really?
I really dislike him, especially with all the like widow hunting that he does. Like he really expects the single Jewish women of their world to like be falling over him because he has just such a high opinion of himself, I think. I did feel bad for him during the episodes where he is in a health crisis. You're not necessarily equipped scientifically to understand a lot when you grow up like that. And it can be, very scary and like if you see what you think are signs pretending you're deaf, like it's a tough thing.
The show does humiliate him. I mean, there's that excruciating scene near the end of season 1 where Shalom goes on a matchmaking date with a younger woman.
Who doesn't mean a matchmaking date with
and she thinks that he's trying to set her up with the son. And then she's like, oh, I'm really sorry. And she's obviously very awkward. She's like, I think of you as like a father and a rabbi, but not as a person to marry. And it's just, oh, that's just excruciating. But I really liked Shalom, especially in the beginning, because he was just like all my old aunties. Like when Akiva is into Elisheva and he's like, but what's wrong with you? Why would you settle for a widow? There's nothing, it's just a lot of those attitudes toward widows as being kind of soiled or secondhand or maybe even ill-omened ring very true to me from a lot of my elder family members. So it's awful, isn't it? Because it's an awful thing to believe, but it just made me very nostalgic for them.
No, it is.
And I felt so sorry for him. I mean, he's a dreamer just like Akiva, and he wants these things that are unrealistic, and he just keeps getting, punched. All he wants is for his son to get married. His son gets engaged twice in the season, but can he get married off? No.
It's so. Although one of the reasons they don't get married is Shalom's fault, because he does go to Elisheva at the end, which I thought was truly a cruel thing to do.
Yeah, but I mean, Elisheva's parents should have been, or, her family should have been saying that to him. Like, what's your son doing messing with our daughters?
Yeah.
Way too mature. I mean,
from their perspective, it's like, what do you mean? Somebody wants to marry her? Cool,
He does it out of love, though, right? I mean...
Yeah, I think what he does is like he misinterprets other people's problems into like his own framework. So when Gitti, who we'll get to in a bit, is like he gives her money because he assumes she needs money because he doesn't want her to work, and like that's totally on his terms of understanding the problem, and he completely misses the real problem. But
isn't that true of all dads and granddads? I mean, that's kind of how they operate. I mean, I think they try to help, but they're products of their time and culture, and it's often at an angle to what's really needed.
Yeah, that's true. He's definitely like a realistic kind of person.
I mean, all the kind of stupid stuff he does comes from love. Whereas with Akiva, sometimes I think the stupid stuff he does comes from I know both of them have self-love, but I feel with Akiva there's more of it. I can forgive Shalom more.
Yeah, Akiva definitely is the type of person who he has very big dreams, and then when he's confronted with the reality of those, he like freezes and shrinks. So, it happens over and over again with his engagement and even his like changing his mind with Elisheva and a lot of the stuff that he does, even his storming out, like leaving Shalom, which Shalom, demands he do. Like it was very interesting. I did find that really satisfying. Like when Akiva breaks up with Esti's father and Shalom's like, get out of my house.
Yeah.
Person, I was like, yes, come on. This kid's got to learn some responsibility.
Exactly. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see what happens next. We'll see.
I guess we should shout out Grandma because
Grandma's
she's a big
legend.
Person. Yeah,
legend. Grandma, who's in an old age home but now has a TV and does nothing but watch these really dodgy serial dramas that are full of racy affairs and adultery and sort of.
It's incredible, and like the horror of her family when they see like that she's watching this is so priceless. Like the consternation on their faces, but they can't say anything because it's Grandma. So it's like it's like maybe my favorite like running joke throughout the whole season. And like she takes it so seriously because obviously she's like an 80-year-old woman who has probably never watched TV before. Like maybe she's seen it in a doctor's office, but now she has it all to herself and only time. So of course it's gonna like become real to her. It's incredible.
And she's such an addict. Like so at some point she gets angry and gets them to take away the TV, and then she has to go to like her little old lady neighbor and say, please let me watch the TV. And then it's like, no, I'm watching the news, go away. It's so brilliant. It's things like that are so relatable. That was like me giving up Facebook and then secretly wanting to get on when I was at a friend's house who had the page open. It's like, I know this is bad for me, but please let me watch.
Yeah.
And she was so lovable. Like the final scene with the grandma and the grandpa, like saying the
Oh,
grandpa's like, "Are you gonna come and stay with me or go back?" Oh my God, that was so heartbreaking.
I know.
Come back, grandma.
I know. So I guess the next major plot line is Gitti and her husband.
Legend.
Yeah.
Legend. So as I fell out of love with Akiva, I fell in love with Yiti, and actually also
Mhm.
with her daughter. How do you pronounce it? Is it Rukami?
Chami, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, but the actress, the role, I think coming to it as this kind of British person looking at a woman who on the outside seems to be so constrained by marriage and endless children and very in a very obedient supplicant, position to her husband, and just seeing actually that's not true at all. She's really smart. She's incredibly strong. She's entrepreneurial, she's persevering. Such a complex, like, when do you see such a complex, nuanced role for a woman in TV or film?
Mm.
Like, tell me,
Yeah.
someone, where is the writing like this? It's just phenomenal. Love,
Yeah. Like aside even from like the Orthodox thing,
yeah, just generally.
yeah. I
Um,
mean, she reminded me so much of like my teachers and just like all these people, who I've been around who like a lot of, coming from a more modern perspective, some of it's really like are these choices your choices or are these, is it just your society or are you like giving up your intelligence when you become a mother and a stay-at-home mom? And
yeah, I think anyone who has wrestled as a woman with giving up work, getting married, becoming a mum, everyone can relate to those tales where you have these stay-at-home mums with a husband left and suddenly they're like floundering and then have to work and managing work-life balance and who's going to do the daycare. I mean, it's so unique and also so relatable all at the same time. It's crazy to me.
and it's so like Gitti's arc is so great to me that like the pressure keeps building on her and she almost like refuses to feel it at a lot of points. Like she just kind of keeps going. Like her expression stays like so reserved through almost the whole show.
So
And
how
then
much do
there's
you think of that as being societal concepts of shame and how much is it just her character that she's buttoned down? So obviously, so to explain to the listener, her husband's gone away to Argentina to work and has a kind of crisis of faith or of identity and rings up his wife and says he's just not coming home. He's going to change his life. And she's left with all the kids. She has to figure out what to do for money. But she doesn't want anyone to know, not even her family, which means earning money then becomes complicated because people will be wondering why she's working. And how much of that is to do with the fact that it's shameful to admit her husband's left her, and how much is it her just if I don't admit it, it's not really happening? I don't know.
So I definitely think there is some like self-delusion in there for sure. And some of the time you're like yelling at her, like, just tell somebody, they can help you, But I think it's also, the scene where she decides not to tell someone is so like subtle, because what the way they frame it is that her husband's employer like finds out about this and his wife comes to like tell her that like, oh, they're gonna help, they're gonna start a fund, it'll all be very discreet. Charedim don't do discreet for the most part. So like she's like changing her youngest diaper and she has 5 children and she hears from outside a card that they have going around all the neighborhoods, which they send around for a funeral or for like something big that's happening. So when they need people to give charity, it's like, oh no, this tragedy, this woman left alone with 7 children. She's in such a terrible state. She's like from the Bible and blah, blah, blah. And like, you can just see her go like, that's not going to be me. That's absolutely not going to be me. Like even if technically nobody would know it was her by name, they would know it was her because they live on top of each other. It's a very small area. Her determination to just like, I'm just going to make this happen however I need to. And the fact, like the way that changes her relationship with Ruchami is so well done to me because I think Gitti's one major blind spot is that like she can cope with all of it up until the point where Ruchami can't cope with the idea of her father coming back. That's so realistic to me in just like a relationship, that intense bond that can grow up between, a mother and a daughter in like times of stress like that. And then also Gitti not being able to be like, but we're totally turning him away and he's
Because
not coming
really,
back.
it's kind of weird how they split the burden. So the financial burden goes to Kitty, and of course, there's an emotional burden that she's partly suppressing. But there's also, it feels to me like she takes the finances and her daughter takes the emotions. So she does the childcare. She's the one who starts writing to the little boys who miss their daddy and faking it. she's the one who makes them the candy tree. But she's just so protective and loving, and it's like, I'm going to shield them from this pain. And then I think it's kind of, she discovers strength, right? And what she's capable of. And so when the dad comes back, she's like, WTF? Like, seriously? No consequences? He just slips back in like nothing ever happened. And I'm meant to respect him like nothing ever happened. So like the printing of the posters and pasting them up was just hilarious to me.
Yeah, I really was.
Because that is probably what I would have done at that age. That would have exactly been my expression of, like how I'm going to shame this person and get it all out there.
Yeah, but I mean, even the father, like he says something really telling to Ruchami when they're having their like little chat, or he's really talking to her. He says like, it's not for me. It's the fact that like you and your mother and your brothers don't deserve to be here without a father. The fact is, in this society, like, yeah, there are single women, there are widows, there are divorces. Like it happens. It's not unheard of, but the stigma really is there. So the impact of this decision is not just like, okay, we have a couple of financially difficult years and it's emotionally hard for us because dad left. It's, are the children going to get married because they're from a broken home? It's
same to Asian. Mm-hmm. Or maybe 10 years ago. It's getting now. There's so much divorce. I don't think you can hold those same standards. But there definitely was that a little bit. Oh, will he be a good husband because he comes from a broken home? All that kind of stuff. So let's talk about Gitti even more, because so she tries to work as an assistant in a more I don't know how you describe it, liberal? What's the opposite of Orthodox?
So, it's so interesting. That store that she goes into is in a place called Mamila Mall, which is in like it's actually very close to the old city. You can walk it. There's a hotel right there that I've stayed in that's beautiful. It is definitely like a more American, more modern Israeli setting. And I assume that the people who own the stores are not Datim, which is religious. They're secular Israelis. So it's really seeing Gitti go in there, and like you can tell that she's out of her depth already, just like being there, because none of the clothing even looks like the stuff that she wears.
It's really visually shocking to me, because you've watched these episodes, which is so in this particular world, and you almost forget there's this other Israel out there, which I know is there because I visited it, and then she turns up in the mall and it's shocking. I mean, it's really, oh my God.
And that's still in Jerusalem. That's not even like Tel Aviv.
Tel Aviv, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I was actually kind of sad that the relationship with the woman in the store didn't really work out.
So she goes to do childcare, and then she starts little things like telling the kids like how to say grace before eating and whatnot. It's so funny.
And the woman's like, don't bring your baby, like that'll be fine, right? And like I get the feeling she knows perfectly well that it's not exactly easy for Gitti to find somebody to watch her baby.
Yeah, she's basically a complete, I don't know. It's like, you help me out with my childcare, but I'm going to completely pretend ignorance of everything you're going through. Mm-hmm. It was quite a nasty experience, I feel.
Right, like, oh, it's fine if I pay you in dollars, right? Like, no, it's actually not. Like, that's a very difficult thing.
Although, as it so happens, Gitti's next job is to be a money changer, which as an economist, I found endlessly fascinating, sort of black market money changing, and why you'd want to do it. Just from a sort of abstract aspect, just fascinated me. But it brings us to one of the best scenes, which is when someone, because people know who the money changer is and that they're going to have a lot of ready cash in the house, and someone tries to kind of bulldoze their way into the house and steal it, and she just turns out to be so badass. Mm-hmm. It's like, I've worked too hard and come too far. Like, all that rage that should have turned towards that awful snotty woman and her husband just gets turned onto the intruder, which I just love. Mm-hmm. I think that's when I was scoping it. Like, she's so badass. I love her. She's my heroine.
That's probably my favorite scene in the whole show, because like you can see her thought process. And again, like, it's not like her face changes that much. Like, you can see like her lips tighten, like she's obviously scared, and then she's like looking down at all this money, and she's like, no, absolutely not. You're a terrible person. How dare you come into my house and try and steal my money? Like, get out of here. And of course the guy is,
and she's so tiny, but she's absolutely petrifying, right? I mean, like, I wouldn't mess with her.
I know, yeah. I mean, that's like a nice thing. Like, there's not a lot of soundproofing in a lot of the apartments. So, because everything is made out of solid stone. So, it was really, that was a really gratifying scene.
Yeah. So the way I feel about Shtisel is, come for Akiva, stay for Gitti.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. And the daughter, who is just phenomenal. I mean, a really great actress, because she must have been very young when she was in this. And just a very beautiful, nuanced picture of, I had friends at school whose parents were divorcing at that age, and not that they get divorced, but just all of those complicated emotions. I just felt it was incredibly authentic and so credible.
And it's also like from Ruchami's perspective, like she lives in a woman's world. None of her teachers are men, I guarantee you. She goes to an all-girls school. Her exposure to men are basically her father, her grandfather, her uncles, and her brothers. And so from her perspective, and we see like she's a reader. She likes to think about, she's very, very smart.
She would totally be podcasting on Vogue.
Oh, she absolutely would be. Yeah. Yeah. Ruchami would be like, oh, I found the internet. I'm going. Yeah, we're definitely podcasting. But she's like, so like from her perspective, it's like, why would we need, dad here? Like, yes, there's the social aspect to it, but she doesn't care about that. So if her mother is apparently taking care of everything, and she is like, okay, so I thought about it and it wasn't actually that hard to provide the emotional support that my brothers need. So like, why on earth would we want this guy who hurt us back? And I feel you, girl. I really do.
I really do. And the candy tree. Can we talk about the final decision that Giti makes about whether or not to have another child?
Ooh, yeah.
That's tricky.
That was very tricky. I've definitely heard of that happening. It's interesting because it goes into like the whole question of birth control and like birth control is pretty much, you can tell by family size, not popularly used. But it isn't like completely verboten.
So you can use it then. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's my impression. Obviously, like all these communities kind of have different opinions. But like certainly, like if there was a woman who like a pregnancy would be extremely dangerous for her, she would be allowed to take birth control. Some rabbis say like between like right after you have a child, you don't have to have like 2 kids in a year, but because like part of it is, obviously, they weren't using birth control. And like the whole abortion thing is also really, really complicated. And I almost wish they'd given that more attention than they did.
I was almost like pleasantly surprised that she was just going to a doctor's or a hospital and there's a woman there. But I was like, okay, so it's legal then. It's not like hardcore Catholics where.
Oh yeah, no, it's legal. And it's that like the thing is actually in Gitti's situation. I don't know about like the super, super religious rabbis, but like she has a kid who's not even a year old. If they knew about her whole emotional situation, I'm pretty like, because one of the main concerns in Judaism, like a fetus is not considered as important as a mother's life. Abortion is still not like, people are like, oh yeah, that's fine, but that's definitely the order of things.
So a happy middle balance sounds like.
Yeah. So it's interesting because like psychologically, a lot of the time that becomes a, I had a baby 5 months ago and I'm pregnant again and I can't, like I absolutely can't. I will like kill myself or not be a good mother or whatever, that is definitely a question that comes up, and that's really the situation that Gitti is facing because she's
almost regardless of the husband leaving.
Right. Yeah. So, it's just like a fascinating decision that they had there. And like the fact that she has no intention of telling anybody, and is kind of just really making this decision on her own. When she went to the other rabbi to like ask advice on whether she should let, what's her husband's name again? Something with an L, Lipa.
Lipa, yeah.
Yeah, whether she should let him come back home. And honestly, the rabbi gave such a rabbi answer.
Yeah, I was like, man, remind me never to go to a rabbi for actual advice.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously there are rabbis who could give way better advice, but like that was definitely because marriage is so valued, like marital peace is a huge priority. So if it would require forgetting or ignoring or pretending that stuff didn't happen, then yeah, I could definitely see that being the thing, and who knows, like maybe his advice would have been different if she'd been like, yeah, he sent me pictures of him, of himself in bed with this woman. But the fact that they're able to take that, oh, we could just pretend that was all a dream.
That's why she makes him wait to come home, because she wants him to regrow his side locks, right? So we can pretend. And I think that's what the daughter. So I think what I love about her decision to keep the child is more about what it sets up for next season. That you've got a daughter who's already really struggling with her taking back the dad, now realizing she's having another baby, which is again trying to put the best face on it. And I think it could set up a really interesting Gitti I mean, it's already a very interesting relationship, and I think it's going to give us lots of crunchy stuff for next year or next
Yeah,
season.
no, I agree. And I think it's, to me, a lot of it, I think, was definitely motivated by like, I could feel the, like, oh my gosh, I thought I was going to abort my baby, and then my grandmother almost died. So that's why. Like, I feel like there was probably some emotional cause and effect there. But yeah, it was really delicate, and I really like the way that they, showed the Israeli kind of system for that. And, yeah, I don't know. It was really, really interesting. And because also, like, initially you're like, yeah, Gitsy's just taking 6 days off for herself. Go girl. And then it's like, oh no, she has to make the decision.
Oh, I really want to watch season 2 now. So was it just so the Israeli vets? Just a minute. Have we done the other characters we need to talk about?
Who else? There's Sviarie, Port Sviarie, the other brother.
Of course, yes. Oh,
Yeah,
uh, mm.
he's kind of a schlump.
Yeah, everyone's got a cousin like that though, right? Turns up at weddings, just slightly nondescript, basically inoffensive, and you do your obligatory 5 minutes catch up, and then it's like, I don't know.
Yeah. No, yeah. And you can tell, like, he had such dreams for himself, and and he keeps trying to, like, make things happen. So, like, he wants the higher job in the kollel that he's learning in. And it's a very interesting, just, like, socioeconomic system, because, like, if you are going in the track where you are learning, like, the way they support themselves marginally is that the women work and the husbands bring home a small stipend from the learning, which is the rich guy that we see at the end who's, like, supporting this. But it's not a lot of money, and that's a big motivating factor in a lot of the decisions that they make. Because a lot of the thing is, like, yeah, there are maybe some people who are emotionally and intellectually suited to, like, sit and learn all day, but not as many people who actually do.
Yeah,
So
look at
that
the amount of people who drop out of PhDs, right? I mean, like,
Mhm.
it's nice in theory, not as nice in practice
Yeah,
sometimes.
exactly. And that's, like, a big problem with Gitty's husband, because you can tell that, like, that's what she wants for him, and that is not what
He
he
is
wants for
not
himself.
temperamentally suited to
No.
that at all.
He's like, I mean, he should, like, be a venture capitalist or something. He could, like,
Yeah,
in a different life, he could be, like, a bad or worse Elon Musk.
yeah, for sure. And I kind of like, I mean, to a certain extent, I admire the courage in admitting the self-awareness, the courage to do it. I just feel there would have been ways to do it without leaving his wife in the lurch. But I kind
Mm,
of, fair enough.
yeah.
Try and self-define, but yeah, blimey. So the season 2 that we have to watch, which I'm really excited about, is that it? Are there just 2 seasons?
There are just 2 seasons, I
But it
think,
was
and
so popular in Israel. How was there not more seasonage?
I don't know. I feel like part of it might have been that, like, this is me totally conjecturing, so I'm not basing this off anything. But, like, the actors are fairly famous. The actress who plays Elisheva was she played Vanessa in Daredevil. I think within Israel, the actor who plays Akiva is a very famous actor. So it's definitely, like, they might have been like, okay, I did my 2 seasons and I'm done. But I don't know, because now that, like, this totally old news show in Israel has started to gain so much more popularity here, I don't know. I'm kind of hoping maybe they'll do, like, a couple years later reunion
Yeah.
show or something.
Just do the 5-year gap. Just talk to
Yeah,
George.
exactly.
So
Ruchami's dating, and then, yeah, we can talk about, yeah, maybe it's, like, around Ruchami's wedding.
exactly. So I'm reading some article on the interwebs, which is probably fake, but it's telling me that Netflix's top 10 non-English shows, and who knows, because it's just Netflix. I mean, like, no one
Right,
can
yeah.
cross-check this,
They're
but
so honest and transparent with all their information.
Netflix International Originals VP Eric Barmack has revealed the streaming giant's ambitious step to globalize television. And he told blah something. Anyway, so number 1 is The Protector, which is Turkish. No idea. Number 2 is 3%, which apparently is like a Hunger Gamesy thing, but set in Latin America. Never heard of it. Number 3 is Sacred Games, which, by the way, if I can return the favor, and if anyone wants to watch a foreign language show in a variety of Indian languages, that is kind of like True Detective crossed with political satire. One of the most beautiful trans love stories you're ever going to see. Watch Sacred Games. It's
Ooh,
amazing.
I'm totally putting.
Starring one of the biggest stars in India. Massive satire on the current sort of Hindu fascist government there. I mean, it's just like the most daring, wonderful, amazing show. So watch that. 4 is Perfume. 5 is Kingdom, which is South Korean. I know a lot of the Vokas who are into Korean culture are really into this show. I'm watching it. It's amazing. I want to talk about that. Number 6 is Shtisel.
Woo!
So it's in the top 6 of their non-English language shows worldwide. So you know.
Yeah, well, it's actually funny because I heard that a couple of years ago already, Marta Kaufman, who makes Grace and Frankie, and who obviously was one of the creators and writers of Friends, like optioned the show to make an American version, and I actually I actually sent her production company an email, and I'm like, I'm a hopeful writer in New York. I
Oh,
don't have
you
any
should
real
totally
qualifications,
write for
but I
that.
am Orthodox.
You should totally write for that. Oh my God,
I
you'd be
know.
amazing. So how
Maybe
does
I'll
that
go there.
work? Because that's going to be an Amazon Prime show,
Yeah,
but this is a
you know,
Netflix show.
I'm honestly, I'm really a little bit skeptical. I mean, I want them to do it and I want them to try, but I think the potential to get it wrong is disastrous because Americans do not understand religious Jews. Like, just period, they don't. I've never seen an adaptation that has like really captured it. And the Brooklyn community where they intend on setting it is very idiosyncratic and very like it's very much like this. But if you're Israeli, even if you're not religious, like you are familiar with the way the schoolgirls wear their hair. You're familiar with the way the wigs look. With the what the different size hats mean for the different men. I don't like without intense cultural like information and whatever. I feel like it could be really stereotypical.
Mm.
Maybe not, but like also honestly, I still want them to make this, but like it's just so nice watching this show and it's like, oh, all the actors are Jewish and they're all playing Jews. It's so cool. Like that happens honestly kind of rarely at this
Yeah.
point.
So do you think it's harder for non-Jewish Americans or non-Orthodox Jewish Americans to see or relate to that community, ironically, when it's in their own country, and it's kind of easier for them to be relaxed about it when it's in a different country?
I definitely do think that. Like,
Which is
don't even
weird.
like there are a lot of tensions in Israel and stereotypes and stuff like that for sure. I mean, they hint at that when Akiva's carrying around his army bag, which is like it's like you're going into the army, like you're like
Mm.
abandoning everything we stand for. Like how could you do that? But I think it's also like it's just a hard like I don't even know it perfectly. I didn't grow up in Brooklyn, and I have relatives there. But it's a very very tight knit community that I mean I think crucially also like the language is different in Brooklyn. Like a lot of people, a lot of families speak in Yiddish, and if you're setting Shtisel in a family that largely speaks Hebrew, to bring us all the way back to the beginning, that's already more accessible for Israelis than like your average
Yeah.
American Jew even to translate Shtisel into.
But do you know that it's going to be in Yiddish? Because what concerns me is why are you bringing it to the US? Is it because you think it would be really interesting to explore a US community, but you want to do what Stiesel did, which is really honor and respect that community, do your best, even as crew, to wear appropriate clothing so as not to scandalize them when you're filming in their neighborhoods, and just do it in a really respectful and lovely way? Or are you bringing it to the US because you think US people won't read subtitles and therefore you want to do the whole thing in English, which is a little bit my fear, that they're going to have these Orthodox people in Brooklyn speaking English? Do we know that it's going to be even in Yiddish?
So I don't know. I think like I mean honestly an authentic it depends on the degree like they would have to really decide like which community are these people in? Are they Hasidish or are they yeshivish or are they like which type of person in Brooklyn of Jewish Brooklyn community? Where in Brooklyn do they live? Flatbush is extremely different from Borough Park, which is extremely different from like whatever somewhere else in Brooklyn. And then they could even like they don't have to set it in Brooklyn. They can set it in Muncie, which is its own different thing, or Lakewood, which is its own thing. There are a lot of communities like this that I think it would be really nice to see them represented in a respectful, non like, ooh, look at these alien people,
Yeah,
kind of way.
exactly.
But it's not an easy proposition, and I don't know. Like if it would be in Yiddish, then it would like require a certain amount of like it would require other cultural markers. And even the percentage of English versus Yiddish, and like what like if the kids like if the boys probably would learn in Yiddish in school versus at home they might speak English versus there's so many layers to it that I mean, I don't even know if they're still making this because apparently it was like optioned in 2016, so who knows? But like, it's a difficult prospect for sure.
Mm,
I think a worthy one that somebody should take on, even if it's not this story. It could be a different story.
I
Maybe it should be
agree.
a different story,
Maybe it should
but
be a different story, yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I would obviously watch it,
Oh
especially if
yeah,
you
for
were
sure.
involved. If you're
Yeah,
involved, I'm coming to the set, right?
yeah. I know. I was like,
I'm
you
totally
know, like
pulling
my
the
friend
friend
Marta,
card.
like one of the most famous television, like successful television producers in Hollywood, and I'm like, hey, I have no experience, but can I have a job on your
Did
TV
she
show?
respond, or did someone from her office respond
No,
at
nobody
least? Not
responded.
even a courtesy email?
I know, and I get that. Like, obviously, this is a totally cold email sent. Maybe nobody even checks
You know
their.
what, Michal, don't worry about it. One day when you're like a super famous author slash screenwriter and you're on like Colbert and you're talking about hard times when you're scrabbling up and obviously name dropping, what? Because
Yes.
we're your peeps and
Oh yeah,
it'll be fine.
yeah.
You can just like lightly shade Marta Kaufman. But Marta, seriously, if you're listening, please give Michal a job.
That would be amazing.
Oh dear. But yeah, so it's exciting. I'm not as excited for the US version. I will watch it, but I just want them to make more Shtisel. I'm wondering if that amazing Netflix money that must have been paid out to the distribution company will help fund the star salaries for season 3. I'm really hoping the distribution company. I don't know how it works. Like when you've produced something, when you sell it to Netflix, do you get more money? Like, do you structure the contract so that if it becomes a mega hit, you get more money? Like, when the people sold you to Netflix and that became a big hit. And like,
Mhm.
how would you know? They could just say, well, no one watched it. It's just weird.
Yeah, no, it's so interesting. Like I feel like Netflix is very deliberate about keeping all of this secret, for lack of a better word. But I think it's also really weird when you look at like because not all foreign series are treated the same, right? Like when you turn on Great British Bake Off on American Netflix, it says a Netflix production, a Netflix original series produced with BBC, and it's like
Oh,
that's not true. That's not what
yeah.
happened.
They
We
badge
all
things
know.
as Netflix originals that really aren't when they're out of their domestic territory, which is so
Yeah,
weird.
but this is not pitched as an original, I don't think.
But
Hello?
what was interesting is that so on my account I have a family account so I can see what I'm watching. If I should so choose, I could go into my parents' front page, and they watch completely different stuff to me. They watch like totally, almost exclusively Indian stuff, and Shtisel was coming up on their front page to watch. Like I think it was coming up in a lot of like recommended algorithms, like they were
Hmm.
pushing it. Um, so although I'd seen, like you obviously recommended on Twitter, but it actually had come up in my recommended for you category. And it's not like I've watched a whole bunch of religious or Israeli TV before. So,
Yeah,
um,
no, I mean, the Netflix algorithm is a is its own thing.
what worries
Um,
me is there must be lots of cool stuff on Netflix I never get to because it never shows it to me.
mm-hmm. Yeah,
Hmm.
no, it's so true, and it's also like, yeah, I mean, and it's also like, oh, what's the great stuff that hasn't even been on Netflix from like that's old, that like old TV shows that were
Yeah.
gems that we didn't, yeah.
Cool. I have nothing else to say about Cecil other than if anyone else is still listening, which is maybe doubtful, please watch it so we can talk about it with you for season 2.
Also, if you like this kind of, if you do watch it and you're like, oh, I need more Orthodox Jewish films in Hebrew in my life, I highly recommend a movie called The Wedding Plan, which
Mm.
is, yeah. Also, the main character has my name, and that's the first time that's ever happened. So, it's about a woman who basically decides to get married, and she doesn't have a groom, but she decides to make her wedding anyway and see what happens. And it's like really touching and like just really really good. My sister has recommended a movie that I've been meaning to watch. Can't find it, but it's it's about two young women in the IDF who are like basically just like the lowest of the low possible level in the army, and it's basically about their foibles just hanging around. Mm.
I was trying to think,
Um,
what is that beautiful movie I was talking with you about by this female Israeli director set in the Orthodox
oh,
community?
yeah, I think it's the same Rama Burstein.
Yeah, Rama Berstein.
Yeah, it's Fill the Void, I
Oh
think
my
it's called.
goodness. Yeah.
Yeah, so I haven't watched that because I'm like never in the mood to cry as much as I anticipate crying while watching that movie, but I hear it's incredible.
Yeah, so that was probably my first encounter with this community, was just watching that film at the London Film Festival. And oh my goodness, it was number one, it's one of the most beautiful films I've ever watched. The cinematography is just stunning, the way she frames the shots. This is in 2012. Yeah, it's just stunning. It's one of the best films I've ever seen. honestly.
Yeah, maybe I'll have to watch it.
Yeah.
I just found the movie, by the way. It's called Zero Motivation.
Zero motivation,
Yeah,
brilliant.
it's basically a comedy about these young soldiers in the IDF who are like, what's going on?
Okay, very cool. Okay, so any other good, so what should I watch once I finish Shtisel? Anything on Netflix that's good? Israeli TV?
That I don't know about. I keep hearing people suggest there's like a cop show that I've been told is like Brooklyn Nine-Nine, but in Israel. So I'm thinking about you know what you should watch? Okay, I haven't watched this because I do not have the fortitude to watch this. But there's a show called Fauda, which is about this is like hard politics. It's about like a former I think Mossad agent whose like biggest accomplishment was like taking down this major terrorist, and it was like a hugely traumatic experience, and he's like, you know, he's off the job, whatever, and then it turns out that the guy like is actually survived or something, so he gets back in it. And my sister watched it. First of all, it's actually, I think, like word on the street is it's extremely fair-minded. Like there are definitely Arab and Palestinian narratives in the show, and it's not just like the Israeli point of view.
Okay.
And my sister watched it, and my sister's a pretty she's hard to flap, basically. She doesn't react as like I do to television. I've never seen her, like, her hands were over her mouth, her face was like drained of color. She was like,
Wow.
I've never seen her react to a TV show like this. And she was like, it's really good, but I don't think you can handle it. And I'm like, you're probably right if you are saying that.
Ooh,
So,
okay.
yeah, but it is on Netflix, and I've heard, like, yeah, aside from that caveat, only good things.
Okay, cool. Excellent. Well, this was so much fun. Thank you so much for not only recommending this amazing show to me, but sort of holding my hand through the bits that I didn't really
Oh, of
understand.
course.
I
My
really
pleasure.
appreciated it. It really enriched my life, so thank you.
Oh, good. I'm so glad.
This is like the best thing about VOC, isn't it? It just opens your minds to little things that you would never otherwise find out
It
about.
really does. It really does. I've learned so much. I'm like, even just like talking to Katie about what life is like south of the Mason-Dixon line. I'm like, do you guys really have fried chicken everywhere? She's like, yes.
Brilliant. Cool. Alrighty. This has been fun. No doubt I'll speak to you for season 2 if anyone else wants to join.
Yes.
Otherwise,
Again, final reminder, guys, get on this boat.
yeah, get on the Shtisel boat because there's nothing but joy and laughter and tears and feelings.
Yep, all the feelings.
All the feelings. All right. Bye-bye, Michal.
Bye. So good to speak to you.
Wisst ihr, Kichelmann? Ich hab ihr gesagt, guten Morgen, und sie hat geöffnet, und gebeten ein Glas Wasser. Aber was im Schall? Sie hat sich bei mir aufgeweckt. Ich bin da auf mein Herz, noch. Mach nicht kein Gelächter von mir. Aber ja, das ist wie meistens. So was, Herr Doktor, sag mir, kenn ich und finde alleine Glas Wasser? Stolz, zu lieb deine Dikterin liegt sich in der 8 Chodosh. Du weißt, wie will die Zion im Zorn sie dort bei der Welt. Frisch, im Arorim.